Here is a question that seems simple on the surface. What happened when an enslaved African said no, not ran away, not organized a rebellion, just simply stopped, put down the tools, refused to move, refused to pick, refused to comply? What happened in that moment? Because it did happen, more often than most people realize. And the answer to that question reveals something deeply important about the nature of the slavery system itself, about how it was designed, about what it feared most, and about the extraordinary courage it took to resist it even in the smallest possible way. Today, we are going to go inside that question completely. We are going to look at what resistance actually looked like on American plantations. From the smallest quiet acts that happened every single day, to the moments when enslaved people looked the system directly in its face and said no, out loud, in broad daylight. And what the system did in response, the full truth, nothing removed. Before we talk about what happened when enslaved people refused to work, we need to understand something important. Refusal did not always look like standing in a field with your arms crossed and your jaw set. In fact, that kind of open defiance, while it absolutely happened, was the rarest form of resistance. Because open defiance carried the most immediate and severe consequences. And enslaved people were not naive about the system they lived inside. They understood it intimately. They understood exactly what it would do to them if given an obvious and undeniable reason. So refusal was often subtle, strategic, invisible to the untrained eye. Historians who have studied the records of American plantations have identified a remarkably consistent pattern of what they call day-to-day resistance. Working slowly, deliberately, carefully, invisibly slowly. Not so slowly that it was obviously intentional, but slowly enough that the daily output fell short of what it could have been. This was one of the most common forms of resistance on American plantations. And it was extraordinarily difficult to punish effectively. Because how do you prove that someone is working slowly on purpose? How do you distinguish deliberate slowness from genuine exhaustion in a person who has been doing brutal physical labor for 12 hours a day on insufficient food? You cannot always, and enslaved people knew that. They used that ambiguity deliberately as a shield. Beyond slow working, tools were broken with suspicious regularity on American plantations. Plantation records from the Antebellum period document staggering amounts of broken equipment. Hoes with snapped handles, plows with bent blades, wagons with mysteriously damaged wheels. Enslavers and overseers complained constantly in their journals and letters about the apparent clumsiness and carelessness of the enslaved people they controlled. What they were actually witnessing was a systematic, coordinated, largely invisible campaign of economic sabotage. A war fought with broken tools instead of weapons, and it was remarkably effective. Beyond slow working and broken tools, one of the most widely used forms of work refusal was feigning illness. And here is where the story gets particularly interesting, because this form of resistance created a genuine dilemma for enslavers that had no easy solution. On one hand, an enslaver who allowed every claim of illness to excuse a person from work was creating a system that could be exploited endlessly. On the other hand, an enslaver who ignored genuine illness and forced sick people to work risked losing valuable property to preventable death. Property that represented significant financial investment. And enslaved people understood this dilemma perfectly. They exploited it with considerable sophistication. The most famous example of this dynamic appears in the writings of one of the most famous enslavers in American history, Thomas Jefferson. In his private correspondence, Jefferson wrote with evident frustration about the frequency with which enslaved people at Monticello claimed illness to avoid work. He described it as a persistent problem that he could find no satisfactory solution to. What Jefferson was actually describing, though he would never have framed it this way, was a community of people using the limited tools available to them to resist a system they had no power to openly confront. And it worked often enough to be worth doing. Beyond feigning illness, some enslaved people deliberately injured themselves to avoid particularly brutal forms of labor. These were not acts of desperation. They were calculated decisions made by people who had weighed their options inside a system that offered almost none. A self-inflicted injury that made field work impossible but left the person able to perform lighter tasks was sometimes preferable to the alternative. The moral weight of what that choice required should not be glossed over. These were people willing to hurt their own bodies to preserve something inside themselves that the system was trying to take away. But then there were the moments of open defiance. The moments when an enslaved person looked at an overseer or an enslaver and simply refused, out loud, in plain sight. These moments happened, and what followed them was swift, severe, and deliberately public. The whip was the first and most immediate response to open defiance on an American plantation. But the whipping administered for defiance was different in character from a whipping administered for falling short of a quota. A quota whipping was punishment. A defiance whipping was theater. It was performed in front of as many enslaved people as could be assembled to witness it, because the purpose was not just to punish the individual who had refused. The purpose was to communicate to every watching eye exactly what the cost of refusal was, to make that cost so visible and so visceral that the thought of open defiance would be associated in every observer's mind with the image of what they had just witnessed. The number of lashes administered for open defiance was not standardized. It was at the complete discretion of the overseer or enslaver, which meant it could go as far as the person administering it chose to take it. Historical records and the testimony of formerly enslaved people document whippings for defiance that lasted until the person being whipped lost consciousness. Some did not regain it. Beyond the whip, enslaved people who openly defied the system faced a hierarchy of escalating consequences. Solitary confinement in dark, cramped spaces, sometimes called the dark house or the sweat box. Reduction of already minimal food rations. The iron collar with its protruding spikes worn for weeks or months. Being sold away from family to a plantation with a reputation for particular brutality. This last consequence was perhaps the most feared of all, because it combined punishment of the individual with the destruction of their family and community connections simultaneously. It was a punishment that kept punishing long after the immediate moment had passed. Of all the acts of refusal in American slavery history, none had more seismic consequences than the rebellion led by Nat Turner in Virginia in 1831. Nat Turner was an enslaved man who was also a preacher, a deeply religious person who believed he had received divine instruction to lead his people to freedom. On the night of August 21, 1831, Turner and a small group of followers began moving from plantation to plantation through Southampton County, Virginia. By the time the rebellion was suppressed 2 days later, approximately 60 white people had been killed. It was the deadliest slave rebellion in American history, and the response was as swift as it was brutal. Turner himself was captured after hiding for 2 months in the woods. He was tried, convicted, and hanged. His body was skinned. Parts of it were distributed as souvenirs. Beyond Turner himself, an estimated 200 black people, many of whom had no involvement in the rebellion whatsoever, were killed in the violent white reprisals that swept through Virginia in the aftermath. But here is what makes the Nat Turner story particularly significant in the context of what we are discussing today. The rebellion terrified the slaveholding South in a way that nothing before it had quite managed, because it demonstrated something that enslavers had always feared: but preferred not to acknowledge openly that the people they had enslaved had not accepted their condition. That underneath the enforced compliance of daily plantation life, there was something else entirely. Something that had been watching and waiting, and that something could, under the right circumstances, become something the system could not control. Looking at the full spectrum of what happened to enslaved Africans who refused to work, from the quietly broken tool to the openly declared rebellion, reveals something important about the nature of the slavery system itself. The system needed compliance to function, not just physical compliance, psychological compliance. It needed enslaved people to internalize their own bondage deeply enough that the daily work of the plantation happened without constant direct coercion at every single moment. Because there were never enough overseers, never enough patrols, never enough whips to physically force every single person to work every single moment of every single day. The system needed people to participate in their own oppression. And what the history of refusal shows us is that this participation was never as complete as the system needed it to be, at every level, in every form. From the slowest possible picking pace to the most dramatic armed rebellion, enslaved people never stopped pushing back against a system that demanded their complete submission. That pushback cost them enormously, in pain, in blood, in lives. But it never stopped. And that refusal to fully stop is one of the most remarkable things about this entire history. What happened to enslaved Africans who refused to work? The honest answer is that the system came down on them with everything it had, with the whip, with the collar, with the threat of sale and separation, with public punishment designed to make examples of individuals for the benefit of everyone watching. But here is what that answer misses. The system came down on them with everything it had, and they kept refusing anyway, in small ways and large ways, in visible ways and invisible ways, every single day for over 200 years. A people who had every reason to give up and accept what the system said they were, who never fully accepted it, who kept saying no in every language available to them. That is not just history. That is one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of human resilience ever recorded, and it deserves to be known completely. If this video gave you something to carry, subscribe to this channel right now. We are going to keep telling this history completely. Every act of resistance, every name that deserves to be remembered, every truth that has waited long enough to be told.